that mind that I have to try to make a positive out of a potential negative, I learned that from Raven. So it's not that he got it from me. I got it from him way, way back in ECW, just the foundation for that. The 7 deadly sins, I believe, were going to be angles for each deadly sin, like a person he wanted to work with. And obviously it was going to be a top guy. It was going to be somebody on the main roster. I believe he was on Heat because he lost a loser leave Raw match against Dreamer, correct? That's why I think he was on Heat. He lost a loser leave Raw match at some point to Dreamer. So that there, the idea is solid, dude. The idea that he told me, I remember in catering him telling me about it, it was solid. And you're giving yourself 7 angles over the course of how many years. And obviously you want to build up maybe to a main event spot. So if you're looking at the first deadly sin is your lower card angle, then as you move to the 7th deadly sin, which is going to be your main event angle. The problem was, and I know this for a fact, he kept pitching it to Vince. And he was catching Vince at the wrong time, which was a crapshoot. He could have caught Vince on the best day, and then that 7 deadly sins would be him and The Undertaker, him and Austin, him and Nate. You know what I mean? He just kept catching Vince at the wrong time. And that made Vince absolutely hate Raven, which, by the way, why would you hate a wrestler for bringing you an idea that you can punch up and make money off of the said wrestler? I don't fault Raven for that. I fault Vince. Like, where's this, like, you know, and obviously the writers, he can't pitch to the writers because it'll never get anywhere. So he took the chance of pitching it directly to the owner of the company, just like Edge. Give me the belt. Gave him the belt. He didn't go to a writer or an agent. He went right directly to Vince. And Raven had a history with Vince. Remember, Vince was pretty high on Johnny Polo back in the day to be an agent, to be a writer. He hosted an on-air show with Vince McMahon. Remember, was it Wrestle America or something?
Well, there was All American Wrestling. There was Mania with Todd Pettengill, which he was on.
Mania was the one, like the secondary to Prime Time and All American. But he hosted that show with Vince. Vince had him in a role where he was going to be in creative.
I think Mania was Todd Pettengill and Macho Man Randy Savage. I think All American was Vince and Johnny Polo for a while.
Okay.
Thing is, I believe that Vince didn't like Raven because Raven, I mean, among other reasons, Raven was hanging around with Shane McMahon too much.
That's a good point too. Back then,
yeah, in '94 around that time, yeah.
But that doesn't negate the fact, that's a personal issue. That doesn't negate the fact that Vince, even back then, and that's early in Raven's psychology and how he grew as a character, and could pretty much book an entire company, write and produce. But back then, Vince had faith to put him in the office. So why he turns around, he wakes up one day and he hates the guy that he was actually going to give somewhat of the book to at one point, it just mystifies me.
You are absolutely right. Raven actually lost a loser leaves Raw match to Tommy Dreamer in 2 minutes 24 seconds at the Gund Arena, Cleveland.
Ooh, I didn't know that part. Oh,
yeah, that was. I mean, he was basically on Heat all the time anyway beforehand. But yeah, so he would be on Heat for the rest of the year, and he would appear once more on Raw, losing a winner gets a final Raw Rumble spot to Jeff Hardy, and then he would be released and sent off to TNA, basically.
Where he did some of his best work as well.
Yeah.
What was it, Raven's House of Fun match that he had
Raven's
with
House
X-Pac?
of Fun. Yeah. I asked Dutch this because towards the end of 2003, Dutch was there doing some of the booking. I don't think Dutch was as high on Raven as other people because I think at the time maybe Raven should have been heavyweight champion, the NWA TNA. No, he would have been NWA champion, I guess, at that time in NWA TNA. And he never won the big one at that point. And I think somebody didn't trust him or for whatever reason, he was always a bit hamstrung by people in the office. I think he won the belt a bit later than he should have done, and it sort of killed his momentum somewhat.
You know, he
but then he had to...
Oh, God, I'm sorry.
I was going to say he had a really great feud around the same time with CM Punk in Ring of Honor. as well. So he was, doing some good stuff at that point.
I do have some information on that, and this comes straight from Raven. He didn't get along with Jeff Jarrett.
Yeah.
And Jeff Jarrett was champion. Now, eventually, Raven went over, and that's an accomplishment when, here's the deal. You have Jeff Jarrett and Dutch Mantel, two of the greatest minds in the business. They can promote, they can book, they can write, they can do all that stuff. Raven's also right up there. Now, let's not forget, Jeff Jarrett and Dutch Mantel will look at Raven, look at me, look at other people from that time at that moment and go, ECW guy, automatically doesn't know how to book, doesn't know how to produce, doesn't know how to write, doesn't know good storytelling, right? It's a clash of different, it's really not a clash of different creative styles, just different creative outlooks.
But is it North versus South kind of thing?
Yes,
it's just a
and that's it
difference.
too. And that's it too. And maybe Dutch and Jeff think guy just sits in the corner. How are people going to get excited about that, right? There's no energy. There's no over-the-top wrestling stuff. Both are equally right and wrong, by the way, on both sides. But one of my favorite matches that Raven had, two of them. Number one was him against X-Pac in the House of Fun match. Where Sean took the backdrop onto the cage that was laying outside. Do you remember? Or he got flipped into the cage. It was just a cage on one of the sides, remember? And he took like the perfect bump. The other one, this is where nuance and detail, and I guarantee you, this was a Raven call. Raven, Monty Brown, and Abyss in the first ever Monsters Ball match, and the little icing on the cake. They were locked up with no food, no water, and no light for 24 hours before the match. And all three of them came out. Remember that? Like they were coming out of a hole in prison. And they were covering their eyes. The bright lights. Dude, that's Raven right there. 100%.
It's a shame. Shane Douglas used to do that as well. Apart from he'd just drink energy drinks all day beforehand. Like he wouldn't eat or whatever. And then that was the time when he spewed up Wrestling Raven that time, if you remember that. Around late 2003.
No, he vomited.
He puked during a match with Raven in TNA about like September 2003.
Now, some people would say usually puke talking the match over with Raven. That makes you sick.
No.
Because you're not going to eat or anything. You can't escape them. You better eat before you talk to them.
Just to, I guess, confirm.
There you go, Raven.
Because we're talking about Jeff Jarrett.
Yes, we are.
How could you not? Right, Raven, just to clarify, him and Vince just never got along, basically, because Raven wouldn't stop pitching to Vince. Is that basically it?
Raven did the unpredictable sin. He committed the unpredictable sin of catching Vince maybe more than once on a bad day or a bad time or a bad moment. Because if anybody can understand the 7 deadly sins, it should be Vince McMahon. And I remember Raven sitting in catering, telling me about it, and I'm sitting there going, dude, you're gonna do this on Heat? This is like a main roster angle. He goes, if I do it here, at least I can get maybe the first 2 or 3 and then redo it or graduate it onto the main roster, on the main show. It's like, dude, it's a great angle.
Do you remember any more specifics of that, or like who he wanted to be involved with at first? Or were you going to be involved in it, in fact?
I would love to have been involved with it, helping with it if I could. I remember the only pre-tape that I was in the locker room and I saw it was the Johnny Stamboli one. I know we have a what went wrong with Johnny the Bull. See, there's a segue. But Johnny Stamboli, there was something with that. And then I think he was still trying to do something with Dreamer, but they did the loser leave Raw, and I don't know if they could work again. And then I forget who else, maybe Val Venus with the, obviously that's one of the 7 deadly sins with Val's gimmick. So I don't know. That's a question to ask him. Where, and more importantly, I know Taker was on that list. That was where he wanted to go. Taker, Austin, other people. And for people that say, oh, Raven working Taker, Raven working Austin, and these guys, look at what Raven did in the ECW. And what are you going to do? Aim for the stars. You're not going to
He
be
was
like
friends with Steve, wasn't he, for
Yes.
years in
Yeah,
WCW? Probably.
well,
ECW.
that's the infamous club incident where I put the club on the car. It was myself,
Yes.
Raven, and Steve Austin.
But they hung out. They were good friends in WCW, from what I understand as well. So, it's not like Steve and Jeff Jarrett or something who Steve hated. I'm sure he really
They hung out quite a bit in ECW, quite a bit too.